France has accused Australia of breaking the relationship of trust between the two countries during the first phone call between Scott Morrison and Emmanuel Macron since the submarine contract was scrapped. Let's go live to Jonathan Lee in Canberra. Jonathan, the phone call pretty much delayed the Prime Minister's departure to the G20.
Good morning to you, Laura. It certainly did delay the Prime Minister's departure before heading off to the G20 in Rome. We've also learnt a little bit more about the efforts our government has gone to mend and tend to the relationship with the French Republic and Emmanuel Macron. It seems that Scott Morrison penned a personal letter to the French president, which has subsequently led to France calling Scott Morrison, or Emmanuel Macron calling Scott Morrison last night at around 6 p.m. Obviously, it comes some 6 weeks after our government announced it was dumping the $90 billion submarine deal with France, designed and started to be built by the Naval Group. Of course, that was going to cost the French thousands upon thousands of jobs, which is part of the reason for their fury. We're told that it was a candid discussion between the two leaders. You can read between the lines there. They've also somewhat hit out when we start to look at the briefing notes handed out by contrast the Australian government to the French government. The Elysee Palace, in their comments to media, they go on to say President Macron recalled that Australia's unilateral decision to scale back the French-Australian strategic partnership by putting an end to the Ocean-class submarine program broke the relationship of trust between our two countries. It also goes on to say, Laura, it is now up to the Australian government to propose tangible actions to redefine the basis of our bilateral relationship. So certainly putting it back on the Australian government there to mend and fix things. It's interesting to note that carbon emissions were discussed, at least in some capacity. While our government says it wasn't raised or commented on our climate ambitions, the French certainly believe it was discussed. In fact, they went on to say that Australia needed to do more to curb coal. That question was put to Treasurer Josh Frydenberg on Sky this morning. Here is how he responded.
It wants us to cease consumption and production of coal at national level and abroad. What do you make of that? Is that a non-starter?
Well, Australia has just outlined its plan for net zero by 2050. That's a significant step forward. And as you know, we've reduced our emissions by more than 20% since 2005. And at the same time, our economy's grown by more than 45%. You know, we're walking the talk when it comes to reducing our emissions.
OK, well, the Prime Minister's away. We have an acting Prime Minister in Barnaby Joyce, but Scott Morrison has left a message for farmers back home.
He certainly wanted to leave a message, didn't he, Laura? Yesterday, you might recall that we had Barnaby Joyce talking about carve-outs in net zero emissions, trying to look after the farming sector, the agricultural sector. Obviously, we've had enormous discussions over the past 2 weeks. The Prime Minister, while he's away overseas, selling Australia's message, selling our cuts to emissions, has also made sure that he's passed on a message to farmers talking about exactly what the coalition is trying to do, ensuring that while we meet our climate ambitions and cut carbon by 26 to 28% on 2005 levels, it's not at the expense of the regions and the agricultural sector. This has all been given to a Daily Telegraph summit for the bush, which is all about making sure that concerns are being heard. Let's have a listen to what the Prime Minister had to say in that pre-recorded message.
Our plan for net zero doesn't force our farmers to do anything more than what you're already doing and will be choosing to do in the future. And we won't be asking the states or territories to use their powers under our plan for 2050 to regulate the way you use your land. We trust you as being the best stewards of your land. Our government wants Australian farmers to be able to choose how they use their land to get the highest and best outcomes.
Laura, I wonder if farmers are somewhat sceptical after feeling that some of their land rights were previously taken away from them. Of course, the fundamental difference we have now is that the Labor Party, the opposition, wants to legislate those net zero cuts. The coalition, though, wants to make sure that it's done through technology, not taxes, as it says. It's a very movable feast at the moment, especially with Matthias Cormann starting to buy into things from the OECD, talking about the need for taxes, which is quite a stark difference from what we became accustomed to when you were sitting here in these studios.
Yeah, he certainly changed his argument. Different situation, of course. Jonathan Lee, thanks so much.